Volodymyr Zelensky has arrived in Brussels ahead of an emergency defence summit with senior EU leaders as Europe prepares to ramp up defence spending. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission, said this morning that leaders were meeting to rearm Europe and further cement their support for Ukraine. She says extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures.
This is a watershed moment for Europe. And Ukraine is part of our European family. It's also a watershed moment for Ukraine. Europe faces a clear and present danger. And therefore Europe has to be able to protect itself, to defend itself, as we have to put Ukraine in a position to protect itself and to push for lasting and just peace. We want a peace through strength. And this is the reason why I present today to the leaders the Rearm Europe plan. The Rearm Europe plan provides up to 800 billion euros for defense investment. It gives the member states fiscal space to invest in defense. It gives the member states possibility to invest in the Ukrainian defense industry or to procure military capabilities that go right away to Ukraine. So it is to the benefit of rearming Europe, rearming the European Union, but also arming Ukraine in its existential fight for its sovereignty and territorial integrity.
Well, Ukraine's President Zelensky also addressed the press ahead of the summit, saying that he is grateful for European support.
We are very thankful that we are not alone, and these are not just words, we feel it. It's very important. You made a strong signal to Ukrainian people, to Ukrainian warriors, to civilians, to all our families, and it's great that we are not alone. We feel it and we know it. Thank you so much for everything, and signals to increase our production and signals to, with the new program, to increase the European security. That's, I think, the great decisions. Thank you.
President Zelensky there on his way into that meeting. Let's just show you some pictures live from inside the meeting room. We are expecting some of those leaders to to give us a few words before that meeting starts. Let's go to Nick Beek, who is in Brussels, who was in the building when President Zelensky arrived, and Ursula von der Leyen said that this is a watershed moment for Europe. Nick.
She did, Sarah, and I think it was really interesting watching President Zelensky. He was just a few metres away from us. The reception he got, the warm reception, the arms that were put around his shoulder, the fact that he was there with Ursula von der Leyen for quite a while, so all the cameras could capture this, images that will be sent and viewed by the Kremlin and by the White House. In terms of what they can achieve today, this is an emergency summit, so it hasn't been weeks and months in the planning, so there isn't a big list of things they're going to tick off and agree on, of course, even if there is agreement. So I think there'll be more strong words later. But in the here and now, President Zelensky desperately wants this help, particularly if the Americans are stepping back in terms of military supplies they're sending and not sharing intelligence with Ukraine. So that is one thing they're looking at as a matter of urgency. And then on the other hand, they're talking about investing billions of euros in the defence industry in Europe in the years and decades to come.
Now, the pictures have just cut away from those leaders inside the meeting room. Just give us an idea of the timetable of today and what we might expect at the end of the meeting.
Yeah, well, we've got an indication of the sort of discussions happening today from the arrivals when the various politicians arrived, the leaders, and some of them chose to speak. And interestingly, Sarah, just sort of catching up on a few of the things that were said, Donald Tusk, who is the Polish Prime Minister, who used to actually chair the meeting of the 27 EU countries, he was saying that the first priority needs to be to secure the EU's border. So he's looking at possible aggression from Russia in the future on EU soil, whether that's the Baltic states or elsewhere. So that's one thing they'll be looking at. Also, I think what may come up today, even though it's not really on the agenda, is what President Macron of France has been talking about. He's been raising the possibility of France using their so-called nuclear shield, their nuclear capabilities, and extending it to other countries, maybe Germany, for example, if the Americans are going to walk away from European security. And today we heard a few people saying, well, actually, that sounds like a good idea. But Olaf Scholz, who's the German leader, not for much longer, he was saying, well, you know, Europe shouldn't give up on US nuclear deterrence. So I think, you know, lots of different speeds that leaders want to work at, maybe different directions, but all agree this is a really critical moment, and it can't be a question of lots of platitudes and nothing comes out of it in the coming weeks and months.
OK, Nick, in Brussels there for the moment. Thank you. We will cut back to that meeting in Brussels. If there are any public words before that meeting gets underway, we'll let you know if and when that does happen. Let's go to my colleague Vitaly Shevchenko just to talk about the implications of this. Vitaly, really strong words as those leaders went into that meeting, really talking about this being a watershed moment.
Well, absolutely. And
That's my colleague Vitaly Shevchenko. There's clearly a slight issue with his line there. We will try and get back to him at the moment. As I say, we were expecting to see some pictures, maybe hear some words, some more words from that meeting there in Brussels. But I'm just looking at the pictures at the moment. There we go. There's more leaders arriving. That meeting is due to get underway. And as we've been talking about, there are two real agendas there today. They're talking about boosting European defence spending. Spend, spend, spend. That is what we heard from the leaders there, what they would be talking about. But also, of course, expressing support for Ukraine. President Zelensky very much a part of that meeting. So we will return to Brussels when that meeting is underway and when we've got a little bit more. Let's talk about the UK Defence Secretary, because he is expected to discuss the US decision to pause intelligence sharing with Ukraine with his counterpart in Washington today. John Healey will join Pete Hegseth on Thursday for a bilateral meeting on a possible peace plan while efforts continue to bridge a transatlantic rift, this over the country's future security. And it is worth saying that Sir Keir Starmer isn't at that meeting in Brussels. There are 27 leaders there. Sir Keir Starmer not there today, but as we say, Sir John Healey will be meeting the US Defence Secretary Pete Hegseth in Washington to talk about that transatlantic issues.